Peace everyone, Unmasked here and welcome back to the tutorial on the Graphite Falcon. Yesterday we did this wing and the tail feathers, and today I'm going to do my best to complete it, but I don't want to rush through the project, so we're gonna finish up this wing for sure, and then I'm going to jump down to the piece of wood that our Falcon is perched upon, and then maybe perhaps get to the rest of the bird. So the strategy for the second wing is going to be identical to what we did over here. We're going to start with blocking in some of our darker feathers, and I think I'm going to start right up here with this feather. I'm going to try to keep my head out of the camera. I didn't realize how far away this wing is from my hand. Okay, so I'm just going to, still using the same pencil by the way, the 2B Tombow Mono graphite pencil, and I'm just going to try to get nice clean edge for these feathers. Do a couple layers of my graphite here, get them nice and dark. And these feathers have that really thin white spine running through them, so I'm going to be careful to make sure I add that spine and slowly work up to it, make it nice and thin, just like we have over on the other wing, which you can't quite see on camera right now, but I can assure you that it is there. Slowly add that spine by adding a line right underneath of it. And you can make it a little bit bigger than what it may appear to be, and then just slowly shrink it till you get it just right. Just using a medium pressure here with my pencil. Gotta make sure I posted this event correctly, because I don't see anybody in the chat right now. So I'm just gonna check that really quick and make sure that I posted it correctly. So everything seems to be correct here. Yes, okay. So alright, so hopefully I'll have a couple people in the chat. If you're in the chat, if you're watching, let me know, just so I know everything's working correctly. I'd hate to live stream the whole thing and had to set it up wrong or something like that. Anyways, I'm going to continue filling in this feather. Just a nice layer of this dark graphite. Get the feather nice and dark. And just like before, I'm not pressing hard. I'm letting the pencil and the paper do all the work. And then I'm just going to do a couple layers, light layers, to let the graphite build up for the really nice dark value. Hope you guys have been enjoying this graphite project. It's been fun. We might even get it complete today. Creating quite a bit of dust here on my paper, so just want to make it clear that I'm kind of ignoring it. I'm being very careful not to let my instinct to brush it away take over. You don't want to brush that away because it will smear, and you don't want to smear anything now over top of the background. Oh, hello, Wendy. Okay, I feel better knowing somebody's in the chat. I was worried for a moment. I know that I started the stream a little bit early, but I was starting to wonder whether or not I had it set up correctly. I was afraid I might have it on private or something, but I'm glad that you're here. Oh, and Chrissy, good. Yes, I feel much better now. Yeah, I started the stream about 15 minutes early than what I had it scheduled for. Today is my sister's last day in Poland. Well, perhaps, depending on the storm situation over on the East Coast, but today is supposed to be her last day in Poland for a second time. So, trying not to spend all day working so that we can go have some fun. Alright, again, just kind of creeping up on that thin spine on the feather here, making it nice and thin. Don't want to make it too thick because then it won't look natural, it won't look real. The details, because of the size that I'm drawing this bird, it's rather small. I mean, the scale of the drawing is quite large, but the bird in relationship to all the details is actually rather small, and there's a whole bunch of details. So the details are smaller than what you would imagine, and you don't want to draw them too large because then it will just look off. So you gotta be really careful. Take your time to get those details in there. I'm thinking that if I don't get this done today, I might do an extra stream next week as well. That way next week we can also start a new project. I'd love to get to that tan paper project. And I'll have to find a good reference photo. Not sure what I'll do there, what subject I'll do. I really like the idea of doing a portrait or possibly a figure. I really like the toned tan paper with the limited color palette when I'm doing the portraits and when I'm doing figures as well, because it's so nice. The toned tanned paper just looks really good with any skin tone subjects, anything that has skin, because it adds just a really nice mid-range value. Alright, starting on this third feather now, kind of comes back right there and then up like that. I'm going to give my pencil a quick sharpen so I get some nice clean lines for those details. It's hard to get this angle with the way that I have my paper sitting. You know what? I'm going to move my paper really quick. Have it taped down. I see that on the camera I'm kind of out of frame a little bit. So let me just bring this wing. I think I'm going to bring it like this here. Make sure I'm in focus. There. And then I'll move it as I need to. But that should be a little bit better, and you guys should be able to see what I'm doing a little bit easier as well. So even when I'm doing like really thin, clean lines, I'm using multiple layers, kind of a sketch. Feels like a sketch a little bit, but really what I'm doing is I'm just following that same line, and I'm slowly adding layers to make the edge of the line really clean and really dark for these details here. And I'm using just the very tip of the pencil, very, very lightly until that graphite builds up into a really nice, clean, dark line. Same thing with this detail, this spine coming through this feather. So referring back to the new project on the tan paper, aside from my own personal feelings, like really enjoying doing a portrait or a figure of some kind on that paper, what other subjects do you guys feel interested in me doing? Because I mean, it's nice when I get to choose the subject, but it's also nice to do a subject that you guys are interested in as well. So if you have any suggestions, let me know, because you know me, I'm always open to suggestions, and the less I have to think, usually the better. Oh, hello, Steve. Welcome. Glad to see you again. Hope the appointment yesterday went well for you. Alright, so this, there's another thin feather kind of right here, real thin detail. I'm going to fill that in really quick. And we're getting down to the feathers that we dealt with yesterday that kind of have the charcoal shaded tips, and then it kind of fades back into a lighter color. So again, the strategy was to just ignore all the details and kind of fill in a little bit of graphite on the tips, and then use our blending stump to fade that value back into the feather. So I'm going to do the same thing, because the strategy is, like I mentioned, the strategy for this wing is identical to yesterday's. No reason to change something if it worked. And let's see here. Alright, so here's where that other feather begins. Trying not to lose my spot here with the details. These feathers just kind of feel like I have to double look, make sure I'm on the right feather. I mean, you could get away with just kind of darkening the tips of all these feathers fairly indiscriminate, but it's best to just be as accurate as you can, you know? Alright, now we're coming to this rounded feather. Slightly more rounded feather. There's kind of a gap right there. This dark shade comes up a little bit higher. And I'm not too concerned about any texture or pencil strokes on the edges of these feathers. I'm not sure if I mentioned that yesterday, but I'm just kind of gently filling in the space, as opposed to concerning myself with any direction, specific direction that I take my pencil. I'm actually kind of doing a cross hatching a little bit to just fill it in just slightly darker at the very bottom. Alright, which feather am I on here? Okay, I see where I'm at. go. A few more feathers to go. I posted the work in progress picture after the stream yesterday over on Facebook, so you could kind of get a better visual representation of what the drawing looks like. Tried my best to get the values in the image correct, but as all of us are looking at different screens, sometimes it's difficult to balance out those images so that they look the best for everybody. But I did what I could, and hopefully you saw something similar to your own Falcon if you are drawing this. I don't think I recall seeing any work in progresses from anybody that is currently doing this Falcon, so if you are drawing it, you know, feel free to post it and tag me in it so that I know, so I can see it. I'd love to see it. Alright, so this feather is kind of tucked behind a lighter feather, so I gotta do some weird texturing down on this edge here. Not too much though. Alright, before I bother blending out any of that, I'm gonna jump up here. I have some more dark feathers that I can fill in the information, like this one here. Let's see, kind of has a gap right there. So fill in this feather. Let's see if I can't smooth that out a little bit with my blending stump. There we go. It's a little bit better. Same thing with these feathers here. They need to be smoothed out. The graphite's not quite getting down into the depths of the paper, and when you smooth it out with the blending stump, you don't want to be adding a lot of pressure or anything like that, because I'm going to come right back over top of it with my pencil to just darken it a bit more. That should be good. Should get rid of some of the grainy look from the graphite. On this paper in particular, it just takes a couple layers to fully fill in the tooth of the paper. Alright, I think I'm going to turn this drawing one more time. Put it here, and I'm going to work on some more of these darker feathers. I'm going to sharpen my pencil real quick. Not getting quite the tip I want. I want a nice sharp clean tip. Oh, there we go. Alright, let's see here. So there's this feather here, nice sharp tip on it, and pretty much comes up to here. And then has a bit of it going right there. And just kind of fill that in real lightly. And then we have these dark feathers here. And I think what I'll do is I'll kind of pencil in the outline of them a little bit, and then just fill in the dark areas here. So this kind of comes back all the way to this feather, and then I have another dark feather kind of right here. And let's see, here's the shape. So I'm kind of working in the shape of just the dark part. It's a bit it's just a bit of a strange shape, nothing in particular. Just trying to get the correct shape here. And then there's, let's see, kind of a triangle gap right here. And all of this is dark. All of this part is dark. I'm going to fill in that information so I have it. And then this is dark here. It kind of goes up like this. Again, it's not super important that you get it exact unless you're really going for to make your drawing look identical to the photograph. If you get it in just about the right area, it's more important to have the volume of detail than it is to have the accuracy. Just so it doesn't look plain, because if you just fill in the information all dark without adding, you know, some specks of detail in there, then it will just make the drawing look more like a drawing rather than a photograph. Alright, I'm going to start filling this in. There we go. It's a bit grainy, so I'm going to do one more layer. That looks better, like this. And then try to, I'm going to turn the drawing one more time so I can get a better view of these details here. So this feather kind of goes down like this. Has this gap right here. All of this is dark. Goes all the way back to about here. This is, yeah, so it kind of zigzags a little bit right there. Let's see. This feather is right there. Kind of goes like that. And all of this is dark. All of that is dark, right? Yes, so all of that is dark. Just gonna sketch that in real quick. Then I have these feathers here that have kind of a unique pattern to their darkness. Kind of like this, just kind of like one side. Same thing here. It's kind of wobbly shaped. It's not real clean lines or anything. There we go. So that's all dark. This is all dark. And let's see. Then I have this feather here. Alright, let me just fill in this information. that will be a majority of the dark spots that we're going to pencil in like this, and then we'll do some shading with our blending stump on the larger area of the feathers down there. If you guys have any questions, as always, feel free to ask. Pencil is getting fairly short. I'm gonna have to buy some more graphite pencils. I've needed to buy some more graphite pencils for some time now. Just have been reluctant to spend any money on supplies. Alright, that's filled in quite good. So I'm going to take my blending stump now. And I think I'm gonna start on these ones over here. Just kind of soften these darker edges of the feathers. Just bring some of that mid-range shadow, I guess. Not really a shadow, it's kind of just the color of the wings. Bring it up into the feather, let it fade. Try to keep the bottom edge nice and crisp against the sky. You don't want to soften the edge of it, just the upper part that is blending into the feather here. I'm going to go back and kind of fill in the entire feather at a time. I think that might move this project along a little bit faster. So I'm just going to kind of softly move the loose graphite up, just give the entire feather kind of a soft gray value, not press hard. That way everything's still nice and soft. And then we can add the stripes. They're kind of stripes on the feathers there. Use the kneaded eraser to pull out any highlights that you might see. There's a few highlights that I'll use the kneaded eraser to pull back out. Kind of using the blending stump to draw in each feather as I go along. Take that soft gray all the way up to the next layer of feathers. There we go. last few feathers here. Yeah, I didn't do this. I didn't kind of use the blender yesterday for kind of almost drawing in each individual feather, and I really like the effect that it's giving. It's giving me a bit more subtle separation between each individual feather, and it creates a really nice natural looking pattern that on this wing I kind of used the kneaded eraser to pull out some of the highlights in between each feather in order to make it in order to create that separation. But by just drawing in each feather with the blending stump, I'm actually getting the same effect but with less effort. So I'm glad I kind of stumbled upon this idea to do this. Now some of the darker feathers up here, I'm going to continue to add a bit more value with the blending stump before going to the kneaded eraser. Any of the darker spots, you can take some of the excess graphite from the dark, just kind of rub the darker areas that you penciled in to put extra graphite onto the blending stump, and then you can just use that. So pull in some extra details into the feathers here. Just slightly, you don't want to overdo it. Just real lightly. There we go. Now I'm going to grab the kneaded eraser. There's some lighter areas coming through these wings right there, and then also there's kind of this highlight right in this area on this feather. Pull that out, and then also there's kind of this spot right here. Just pull out that spot. Alright, now we can add some of our details. Again, I'm going to start over on this side, just work my way back over. Oh, so Steve, you got some friskets. That's cool. To use with pastels, to do some frisketing with the pastels. Is that your intention there? What I don't know is, do you draw on it and then use a blade to cut out, then tacked on your paper? So there's a few different ways. If the subject that you're cutting out, you can cut it out, like draw on it and then cut the frisket before ever sticking it to your paper. That might be difficult if your subject is really detailed, but otherwise you can draw onto your paper, your paper that you're actually going to be using. Lay the frisket down just as a large square that covers your subject, and then cut your drawing. Because the frisket is translucent, you can easily see anything you sketch through it. and then just use, you know, a real sharp X-Acto knife blade to cut it. You got to use, you know, a bit of a delicate touch so you don't cut through and leave too much of a mark or fully cut through your paper when you do it that way. Sometimes you got to do a couple passes with the blade to ensure that you've cut through the frisket. But the frisket, you know, it's low tack, and when you're coloring or painting over it, you'll be extra cautious of the edges to make sure you're not brushing any color underneath of it. I'm not sure if I don't remember if I showed cutting out anything when I worked on the Fantasy Elf pastel piece, when I had frisket laid down for that pastel piece. I don't think that I did. I think I just kind of explained how I did it. But on that particular piece, there was clearly too much detail to cut out of the frisket and then lay down. So I had the sketch drawn onto my pastel mat first, and then I just laid a large piece of frisket over the entire thing and cut it out with an X-Acto knife, and that's how I did that. And then, of course, during the entire process of doing the background, I made sure that I was always working away from my edge of the frisket to make sure it didn't accidentally peel up or something along those lines. So maybe like 8 or 9 feathers left, adding in these kind of striped details, just like yesterday. And then we can go up here and do these feathers that are not really clear as to where the details are, just kind of all over the place. So they're fairly loose. Don't have to be exact with them at all, really. Where's this feather? Okay, I see it. And then this stripe comes over here and drops down a little bit. yeah, this Falcon's really starting to come together. I'm not sure. So Frisket is not going to work with watercolors because it's such low tack that the watercolors will not stop at the edge of the Frisket paper. They will just seep underneath. I had that issue just using ink. I was using black ink, and it would, if I touched the edge or it touched anywhere near the edge of the Frisket, the ink had no problems going underneath the Frisket. So watercolors, they're not going to work all that well with the edges of Frisket. I just want to make you aware of that. But with pastels, it works fine. With acrylic paint, it would work fine as long as you're not brushing in the direction. You know, you're just being careful with the direction that you're painting in. But watercolors will not work. It will just bleed right underneath the Frisket. So be aware of that. All right, I am going to now switch to my blending stump here. Just bring in some values here into these feathers. And also right around its head, falcon head, because the head is rather light. So I want to get these values here behind it. That way the head sticks out from the body nicely. There we go. Also, I've never worked with acrylics and would like to experiment there too. Thanks for the watercolor tip. Good to know. Yes, if you're going to be doing like the watercolors and you wanted to block stuff off, really, the only good option there is the what is that stuff called? I have some right here. What is it called? Masking fluid. That's it. Yes, the masking fluid is what you'll have to use when doing watercolors. And masking fluid, it does work on pastel matte, kind of. It's not really the greatest. It does kind of make the paper warp a little awkwardly, and it's far from ideal. Let's just put it that way. It's far from ideal, which is why I like the Frisket with the pastel matte. It doesn't work with the sanded, the sandpaper, like the UArt paper. The UArt paper is too thin. So yeah, the masking fluid with pastels doesn't work all that great. You can kind of get it to work, but like I said, it's not going to be ideal. So just be aware of that as well. It's hard. I imagine that it's mixing watercolors and pastels. I'm not sure if there's really a good way of doing that. I'm certainly not aware of one right now to get those two mediums to work well together. So if you find a way or know somebody that's doing that, let me know and I'll check it out, because I am totally unaware of a way to get those two mediums to work well together. Alright. So I'm just going to use the blending stump here to bring in some of these details of these feathers here, some of these darker spots, and then I'll use the pencil to just increase the crispness of some of these details, because some of these black areas here are rather specific. So I'm just going to use this to get a general sense of these feathers. Alright, now I'm going to grab my pencil, put in some of these details. There's a lot of really thin black lines here. Before sharpening my pencil to get those details, I'm going to try to get the more broad ones. There's kind of a dark feather up here in this area. Yeah, it might take a little bit of experimenting to find a way to get watercolors and pastels to work together, but it's definitely an interesting idea, because you have, on one side you have, you know, watercolors, they like the real absorption, the absorbable paper. You know, that's what watercolor paper is, real soft absorption paper, whereas the pastels, they kind of need that, they kind of need that unique texture, so they're not real, it's not real important that paper be absorbing liquids for pastels to work on there, but it's kind of a necessity for watercolors. So you'd have to try to find something that that kind of balances between those two ideas of paper, being absorption and having enough texture to hold pastels. You're definitely piquing my interest here. Although I don't really use watercolors, never really used watercolors. The closest I got were those inks, but I've always been really interested in watercolors. I just never committed to trying them out. But the thought of combining them with pastels is very intriguing for sure, because I just never heard of it being done. Alright, now some of the final details of our wing here. Gonna get a nice clean tip. Was thinking about using a fixative over the watercolors and then maybe pastels over that. Maybe, I'm trying to think if the brush and pencil textured fixative would add enough texture to whatever paper in order to use pastels on top. I know that, you know, after watercolors dries, it does have a bit of a kind of a grainy-ish texture to it. And I'm wondering if that texture from just the watercolors themselves would be enough to get pastels to stick to the paper good enough, you know, that it wouldn't just fall off later. Alright, now for these teeny tiny little specks right on the back side of this wing. Very, very small. And then they slowly get longer. And if you notice, the pattern actually makes just lines. They're kind of all lined up. So follow that pattern. There we go. And then maybe a bit darker. So I'm going to take the blending stump, create a little bit of an edge, right, taking this wing and kind of pulling it away from the sky just a little bit, just lightly. That way it has a tiny bit more separation there. There we go. All right, so we have both our wings done. Let me slide this over. So there's our wings. I think it looks really nice. I'm going to jump down here to our stump, to our little tree branch. Of course, I made it a tree branch. The reference photo is a guy holding it with a glove or something, some kind of weird Falcon glove. And I'm going to, I'm trying to think if I want it really dark or not. I think I kinda do, but I'm afraid that if I do that, it's gonna pull focus away from the bird. So I think I'm gonna keep it about this. I think I'm gonna keep it about this value here. Maybe add a little bit of darkness, but I'm gonna use the blending stump. I just kind of scribbled some lines on there from previous week. I'm just gonna use the blending stump real quick to just make it more consistent with its coverage. Work around its claws here a little bit, just to fill in the shape of my log or my branch, my broken branch. And I have this side lighter because of the light source, but it's a little bit too light, so I'm going to work this up to the close to the edge, but not all the way to the edge, because I want that rim light, a little bit of that rim light going on. I'm going to pull down, I'm going to grab the tissue that I had from yesterday. I'm just going to pull some graphite down and kind of fade it out right here so that it's not so much detail. Just going to fade out the detail a little bit down at the bottom. That way it seems like the branch is kind of just coming out of the clouds a little bit, but not too much out of the clouds. There we go. Now let's add some more graphite to it. And I'm just going to shade around where I perceive it to be a bit darker, simply because of the light and shadow from the bird coming across it. And I'm going to just do pencil strokes in the direction that the wood grain is going. Maybe add a bit more texture to it. Add some thin lines. Just kind of let the pencil do the work. Maybe have like a deep cut in the wood. Try to make it random. It's got to be random. Avoid patterns. Then darken up this edge where the shadow of the bird is coming across. There we go. I'm going to use the blending stump again to just soften a little bit of the grain from the pencil, but not too much. I like the grain because it adds a wood-like texture. And I feel like it needs just a bit more value on the right side of it. So I'm just going to add a few light vertical lines sticking to that wood grain texture. I'm slowly just going to build up a little bit more value on the right side in general. And again, take my blending stump and just kind of smooth out that texture just a tiny bit, barely touching it. Let the texture of the wood come out a bit. And perhaps I'll take my kneaded eraser and pull out this edge just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I think that works. Maybe lighten up that spot there. Yeah, I think that works for our branch. Didn't take too much effort. And now, let's see. Yeah, I got plenty of time, I think. Yeah, I got time. Let's go right here. Zoom in. Make sure I'm nice and focused. And I am going to start with the eye, because that is going to be a very important feature. I'm going to start with the eye and the beak. Get a nice, the sharpest tip on my pencil I possibly can, because this detail is so tiny. So come right here by the eye. The outline of the eyes should be as dark as you can get it. So I'm going to leave the iris completely white as I can for now, and try to get the shape of this eye as accurately as I can. Getting this shape is very crucial, and very little room for error here. So take your time. And then I have the pupil I'm going to fill in the pupil. Try to get it as close to a perfect circle as I can here. There we go. Continue around the eye. There we go. And then I'm going to take my blending stump. I'm going to create the shadow at the top of the iris here. Very gently. And then also a little bit down at the bottom. Just barely touch it. I gotta do my best to bring out the subtle highlights that are in the eye. So, right there. Very, very small details. And then I'm going to get a point, a little sharp point with my kneaded eraser and see if I can just bring out a tiny little speck of highlight just by tapping it a couple times. And that's about as good as it's going to get there with that small eye. Next thing, I'm going to put in the nostril. That's like right here. And then the beak. Oh goodness, the beak. The first thing I'm going to do here is fill in the mouth. So the dark shape of the mouth where the beak is open. And it's so small. And then the outer edge of the beak is very dark. And the bottom beak as well is very dark, just the tip of it here. And then I'm going to use the blending stump and do my best to shade the beak. Bring the dark tip of the beak back into it, and then I'll use the kneaded eraser to bring out some of the highlights of the beak. I need a little bit more graphite here to get that dark edge. Rely mostly on the kneaded eraser to bring that highlight back down to the tip of the beak there. Same thing with the lower one. Now get a nice clean tip with my kneaded eraser and just do my best to make that highlight line come off the beak there. Yeah, it's very subtle, but it's there. And that's about all we can do with that small amount of room for detail. Now we have these dark feathers here, and they're kind of all over the place. I'm trying to figure out what I sketched in here. I'm going to start right here. This is kind of like right under the chest of the bird, and there's just kind of this dark colored in area here. So I'm just going to fill it all in. None of these shapes really, out of context, these shapes don't have any rhyme or reason. So your accuracy is essentially irrelevant. Just try to get the important area is going to be the chest of this bird. And so what I had sketched off in the line art are these diamond shapes that kind of work their way up into a pattern, like a slight pattern of the bird. So just try to get those diamond shapes the best you can, because we are working with a very, very small amount of room here now. The important thing is the direction that they're going. So make sure you're paying attention to the direction that these feathers are kind of flowing. They all go up kind of this circular pattern like this, and then they meet in the middle. If you get the foundation of these shapes down, then you can start expanding out the size of the little diamond shapes, and that will bring everything together. And we'll just use our blending stump at the end to finish it all off. For the feet, I'm just going to do some stippling with the tip of my pencil. Put its talons in, nice and dark as I can, really. Do some stippling to separate, really the only thing separating the claws from the rest of the bird is just a texture. The value is about the same, so it's hard to kind of separate that, but just do your best. If you're drawing as small as I am, you know, the feet are just super tiny at this point. Use my blending stump to at least give it a little bit of dimension. And let's see, got some white feathers right at the top of the foot, kind of where it meets the rest of the leg. And again, fill in the talons. Try to give it maybe just a subtle highlight there. I like that. And then some stippling for the texture of the foot. avoid to outline the foot too much, because it will create that kind of artificial look. Instead, if you can't differentiate from the foot and the tail feathers and stuff too much, then you probably got it about right, because really, I mean, you can't really see that separation even that much in the photograph. It's all kind of getting clumped together. It's subtle, so let it be subtle in your drawing as well. Now I'm putting some of these dark feathers for this leg here. Use the blending stump to bring out some of those darker values. And now I'm going to go up to the body of the bird and just kind of use the blending stump to add the direction that these feathers are going. Give myself a little bit of texture. And I'm kind of doing them in rows, so I leave like a gap in between each stroke. That way there's a little bit of a highlight buildup in the feathers. And there's these loose white feathers right here. Get the darker value around them so they look whiter. Alright, almost done here. Just fill in more of this bird here with the blending stump. Then we'll go back, we'll add some more texture with our pencil, and that will finish it off. It's not a whole lot more with it. I mean, the body of this bird is only slightly bigger than my thumb, so there's not a whole lot left you can do at this scale of a drawing. If you're ever wanting to reach more realism, you have to draw bigger, because the idea is that you know, when you can fit more detail. That's the bottom line. You can fit all the detail, but the real secret with the photorealism and that kind of stuff is drawing the details larger than what they actually are in real life, and then when you stand away from the image, it looks like a photograph. But no hyper-realistic piece of work looks like a photograph when you are sitting as far away from it as the artist was when he drew it. All those pictures online and stuff like that, you know, they're much smaller than the actual piece, which makes the detail in it look unrealistically attainable, which is the whole idea of the photorealism in the first place. Alright, so add some shadow around the beak with this before getting in there with the texture. Right around this side of the eye here a little bit. And this kind of wraps around the back of the head. Alright, now let's get in here I'm going to turn this just so it's a little bit easier for my hand. Sharpen my pencil, what will most likely be the last time. Alright, so the eye has some specks around it. Really short pencil strokes. Kind of has this eyebrow thing going on here. Then the lines kind of swoop up like this. Really super light, super light. I am barely even touching the paper. Putting in all this final texture here. Slowly build up my values. Once I map out the texture, I can go in and start adding a bit heavier lines, add the value there. Almost like fur is what I'm doing here. Mapping out the flow of the feathers and then just adding layers and layers of texture. One thing I want to avoid is going darker than the actual eye here, because if you match the values in the eye in the feathers here, it's going to make the eye kind of fade away and it's not going to stand out as much. I might even go a little bit darker around it, maybe slightly wider, just to help bring out that eye just a tiny bit more. Real light on the forehead. Just kind of bring in some of the detail. We don't have a lot of room here, so it's better to go a little bit lighter starting off than jumping in there with too dark of lines. There we go. I'm just going to soften some of that texture a little bit. Get rid of some of the pencil grain. Oh, hello, Lady Marigold. I'm glad you're able to catch the last little bit of this project here before I jump off. I'm just adding in some of the final pencil strokes and details of our falcon here, and it will officially be complete. Just going in and adding last touches of detail, making sure my values are nice and strong. Nice contrast is always important here. Feathers kind of bunch up and meet right here, create like a little bit of a spine. And there's these white feathers here, they're nice and bright. Then they have this kind of loose texture at the edge. Couple lines running through it. There we go. Let's see, what else? What else? A few lines right there. And over here. Just maximizing the texture best we can, this small drawing. And let's have a look at it real quick, see if there's anything we want to adjust before calling it done. So there's our falcon. I don't really see anything. Maybe grab my kneaded eraser, see if there's any little highlights I might want to pull out. I'm thinking like right here on the top of its head, maybe just lift off some of that graphite there a little bit, bring out its head just a bit more. And because of that, I'm gonna darken up right behind it, just right there, just a tiny bit. Just bring its head forward more, darken up this so it's not so bright. There we go. And then maybe right here around its body, I think I'm darken that up. Soften the texture on that side a little bit more. And I'm thinking I kind of want to darken this tail feather up on this side just a little bit. It's just, I feel like I'm losing it in the sky just a tiny bit. So bring out that tail feather there a little bit more. Yeah, I think that looks better. And then maybe separate that wing from the body by darkening up this edge here. Just the subtle, tiny little changes, you know, you're free to kind of play around with it as much as you want. I kind of like the idea of darkening up this wing area right in here. Just add a little bit more value right there. And then perhaps over here, bring out some of those values a bit more as well. Just to make that wing stand off the page just a tiny bit more in that general area. And I'm going to follow the edge of this top part of this wing just ever so slightly. There we go. That makes it stand off the page a bit better, I think. And who knows, maybe I'll even bring out a little bit more of this cloud here. And maybe this cloud here a little bit. You can just kind of play around with it until you're satisfied with the final piece. Yeah, I think that's good. Maybe bring out this cloud here so it looks more cloud-like. There. And there is our Falcon. I'm very pleased with the way it came out. So I hope that you guys are as well. I hope that you learned a lot from this tutorial. It was a fun project. Next week, now that I have this done, I'll just switch back to doing one stream next week. If I hadn't finished it, I would have done two, just to get this done and start a new project. So I will be back on schedule. I think I'm going to switch the streams to Thursday, but other than that, it's going to be back to 1500 my time. So I'll schedule it out, and next week we're going to start a new project that's going to be on Strathmore toned tan paper. I'll list the supplies that I intend to use. I'll try to get to the line art, reference photo, and schedule the actual live stream very soon. That way you guys have time to get the supplies if you don't have them and you want to follow along or something like that. But I will be using Strathmore tan toned paper. So it looks like this. I have a sketchbook. One second. So it's the oh goodness. So it's this sketch. It's this paper. I'm not going to be using this small of paper, but the paper that I always use the drawing journal in, because it has nice colors. So we'll probably be doing something. The idea is to do something like this, where I just use white, brown, black, real limited color palette. I don't have a subject yet. I was thinking about doing a figure. I really like doing figures. It's really great for practice when it comes to kind of perfecting values, and you know, doing the human figure is always one of my favorite subjects. There's just so much to learn from doing it. So I was thinking about maybe doing something like this, or doing something like a portrait. Doing a portrait. These are one of my earlier portraits. But we could do all kinds of stuff. So let me know what you guys are interested in doing for the tone tan paper and the limited color palette, because I love that. I love the way it looks. But that is going to be it for now. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Take care. Peace.